Good afternoon. I'm Chechunung from SNU, Department of Architecture, and I will be moderating today's seminar. This seminar is organized every Wednesday as part of the City Exhibition Review, and we invite renowned architects to give a presentation, and after that we have a roundtable discussion, and we receive questions from the floor. I would like to introduce some VIPs to you before we begin. We have, representing the Embassy of the Netherlands, the Senior Cultural Policy Officer, Lee Ha-jin, and we also have Ms. Kim Min-young. We also have Chief City Architect Kim Seung-hee from the City of Seoul, and we also have the Chief of USIB, Professor Kim Tae-young. We have from Gyeonggi University, Professor Chun Hee-young as one of our discussants, and from Jungang University, Professor Yoon Seung-hyun, who is our second discussant. And lastly, we have the head curator of the review exhibition, Professor John Hong from Seoul National University. And I'd like to thank all the staff from the City of Seoul for organizing and preparing this seminar. And Professor John Hong will be introducing our first speaker.
Thank you for joining us today. This is the second in a series of Wednesday seminars, and we're very lucky to be partnering with Amsterdam today. Our first speaker is Paco Bunnik. He's the Chief Urban Designer of the Department of Planning and Sustainability. The work of the City of Amsterdam's Department of Planning and Sustainability integrates the higher levels of regional and long-term planning into implementation of urban design and public space design. The department searches for new approaches and stimulates bottom-up, multidisciplinary teamwork that integrates solutions in the fields of urbanization, mobility, and water management. Paco Bunnik is supervisor for the transformation of the Amsterdam Northern IJ Waterfront and related projects, and member of the supervisory team of Amsterdam Zuidas Central Business District. Please welcome Paco Bunnik.
Hi. Hi, John. Good morning.
Yes, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, great to be here. Although virtual, it's very nice to be back in Seoul.
Well, if it's any consolation, it feels like you're in the room right now. You're live.
All right. Hey, what's the plan? Shall I start or?
Sure. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. I'll share my screen. Yes. 1 second. Is this clear?
It's perfect. Looks very clear.
Okay, let's start. Well, thank you for inviting us to this seminar. In 2019, the City of Amsterdam participated in Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism. And in my presentation, I will share some background of the approach of the exhibition, We City, and we'll explain some more about the urban planning in Amsterdam surrounding this theme. When asked to participate as a curator of the Amsterdam submission for the Biennale, I thought that the exhibition should demonstrate how we work with this theme and of rethinking, reclaiming the city as a collective project. Not only the way we work ourselves, also reflect with colleagues, also supported by the embassy in Seoul, the Dutch embassy, the cultural attaché, which linked us together to Korean counterparts, which we had fantastic discussions with. We City, our exhibition demonstrates how on an international level, here just a case we did with Zanzibar, we co-work and research on cultural exchange, and on a local level, how we are experimenting with collective and inclusive ways of urban planning. When I read the title of your Wednesday seminars, City as Verb, I was thinking, what verb could mean something to address to you, and I thought it was to invite. So the way we work as maybe civic servants could also be a sort of innovative way of working. And also the way we planned our Biennale submission is also that we invited two co-curators. One is here, Tjeerd Haccou, who will explain more about the Buiksloterham project, one of the waterfront projects we work on. And the other one is from African Architecture Matters, not present here, but he worked on the international aspect of. So by inviting two guest curators, we sort of embrace the idea of really co-working instead of doing things top down. That's not all. I also want to have a sort of local connection, and in two ways. So we invited a local graphic designer, Shin, a very talented young designer duo from Seoul, to make graphic design for our submission. And we asked them to have an experiment within our show, which is done by Korean students from Konkuk University. Going back to policy, in this exhibition, we investigate how the originally very top-down way of urban planning in Amsterdam is opening up, and how space for unplanned renewal can be included as part of the DNA of a growing city. This theme is very much embraced by our Vice Mayor, Marieke van Doorning, in our policy, who relentlessly pushes us to search for inclusive ways of planning. In the exhibition, we show how in the Buiksloterham, a waterfront development, local initiative is incorporated in the urban plan. Tjeerd Haccou, who will speak right after me, will demonstrate how multiple scales from house, street, park, block, plan, policy, these initiatives find their way in our current plan. And then we have this local connection with Shin, which for me really was important what I just explained. The way you work is maybe even more important than in the end result. So by co-working immediately with the Korean counterparts, you feel a kind of intimacy, and which I think we need in our field of work. These two also teach, besides making beautiful work, and we asked them to find a group of students to invite them into our show to reflect on the We City theme. So some students from the communication design department, they participated. They made schemes on local storytelling on Seoul, so the visitor in We City could also reflect on its own city. And they made stickers, all kinds of stickers with some meaning, which they could use in their city to try to tell stories and to make routes, etc. So it's very interesting, I think. I would like to come back and talk to the students and maybe make these kind of itineraries, and by walking, discussing how the city is evolving. So that we also gave them a wall in our exhibition, so that they were really incorporated in our exhibition. I'll tell something about Amsterdam right now, what we're doing, how we're planning, where we come from, where we're going, and also reflecting on the Building the Resilient City theme, which is the 2021 theme for the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism. Amsterdam, this is a nice series of maps which shows the development of the city of Amsterdam. So from the 1250s to the ages right now. You see that it started as a fisherman's village right on the open waterfront, which is directly connected to the sea. And later, when the Dutch traveled all abroad and at the VOC, East Indian companies, we got richer. And we founded this famous canal district city, which is right here. And what you see happening is that because the city is growing, you see that blue becomes green. So water is, we call it impolderen, it's in polders, so there's gained from the sea, and it's made for agricultural purposes, so to feed the citizens of the growing city. Then in the industrial age, there were train lines made, and more blue becomes green, and the city is still growing. Then in the 60s, you could call the 60s the age of the car. New car roads were planned, new land was made. Also the surrounding cities were growing, as you see. But this is really, car plant modernism in a way. And now we're coming to a state of sort of a network city where we not only talk about Amsterdam anymore as a growing city, but as a whole network of a metropolitan region. So it's a different kind of approach. So we used to be only in Amsterdam, but now we are more like a part of a bigger system. Amsterdam has a very strong and long tradition. Not only Amsterdam, I think the whole of the Netherlands has a very strong tradition in water management. So that partly we're below sea level. We have to control this force of nature, which is much bigger than us as human beings. So by engineering water for centuries, and the way to governance it is very important, I think. From farmer to minister, we had to cooperate with each other in sort of horizontal level, and that makes, I think that also makes the kind of the DNA of Dutch urban planning, which is quite integral, because you have to work together on all kinds of levels to protect yourself against a bigger force. So I think that's a centuries of gaining knowledge, working together. So that means that that's also part of the way we think and we design on multiple skill levels. So it's in governance, it's within the city limits, but also in the landscape. So it's all done in one system. When you look at the city itself, this is a map we made in 2011. It's also a bit old, but still quite active and right. I think that the densification strategy, because we're growing, the city itself is about 880,000 people. The region is about 2.4 million. And what we said in the city itself, that this is an extension plan made in 1934. There was first like this in a circle, and then these fingers came out in the extension plan of 34. And what we do now is that we densify within the existing perimeter of the city. So the city looks more or less like a hand. You see, these are the fingers. And this is the landscape, which is interweaving with the fingers and penetrating towards the center of the city. And we really like this scheme still, because you're always within a bicycle, 15 minutes, you're in the middle of a beautiful landscape. So the relation city landscape water is always eminent in Amsterdam. But because we're growing, we have to densify, and we densify within this perimeter of the city. And we do it in two ways. On the waterfront, which you see here, or on the pre-industrial zonings, or the car road, which is around here. So we try to make smart use of the space. Here in picture, or we make new land, new islands on the waterfront, which we build new cityscapes. But I think this is only about maybe 10% of the renewal. And I think 90%, which is by far the biggest, are in these transformation sites. So old industrial sites, non-used spaces. This is the biggest task we're having right now. Amsterdam has a DNA, I think, with a local connection with, it's founded on water. It has a relation with water, in engineering, but also in beauty and in culture, I think. So it founded on the river Amstel, Amstelredam, built a dam in the river Amstel. That's why the name Amsterdam comes from. And that's where the city's built around, the old city. But the new city we're building right now is more or less built around these longer waterfront developments. So we call also, and it shifts the center of the city more towards the bigger water, which is really interesting, I think, because then in the mental perception of the Amsterdammer, or the center is the center of the city, but because we're growing more pluriformly around the center and along this waterfront, I think also the whole mental aspect of what is the center, which maybe for Seoul is already totally clear, but for Amsterdam is not yet. So we're developing into a more broader system of urbanity, which I think is very interesting and very healthy for a city like Amsterdam. It's not only the city, it's also regional. So this whole waterfront is about 60 or 70 kilometers of re-engineering, let's say. So the harbor is moving towards the sea, westwards. The city is growing that way, but also eastwards. We have Almere here, it's another city, building new islands, Eiburg, maybe making new infrastructure connections. So in the future, you'll be maybe in 10 minutes within another city where you now travel for a longer period. So I think reusing the waterfront and densifying more is a very interesting way of urban design, I think. So you see a picture of the metropolitan region level of Amsterdam, which is about, here are the bigger numbers, and still growing in economy and jobs, also having to deal with climate change, and energy production and consumption is changing fast. So how to deal in a bigger scope with these themes. When we zoom back into Amsterdam, so within the city limits, right now we're working, I'm supervising here in northern parts of the waterfront, because the southern parts are more or less here finished, and here's the project going on, and here's a really big one, Havenstad, which is about 70 or 50,000 new housing units. But on the whole, you see that within a not really big area, we're planning more or less more than 120,000 housing units, which is enormous. You could say it is a city within a city. And yeah, it's not only houses, you need public space, you need hospitals, you need new schools. So it is all part of what we're planning right now in Amsterdam. So within the existing city limits, we're densifying enormously. Here are some pictures of already done and known projects. So the southern waterfront, Eastern Harbor, starting in the mid-80s, finished in the early century, 2005. Eiburg, this is a new island made. Now we're currently designing a new plan on Zeebrugge Island, which we also experiment with new typology. So Amsterdam is not really known for high-rise, so sort of low-rise, mid-rise, some high-rise elements. This is the first urban plan where we really experiment with high-rise, also because it has a kind of position in the middle of long views, so it can be interesting, vice versa, on scales to test with high-rise here. But also we make other, like more suburban typologies still, which are a bit further out of the center, and they have a more like natural or beach feel-like character. So it's a very sort of catalog of urban design on many levels, you could say. Very important in this whole waterfront strategy is that the public domain, so the investment in public domain, not only in public space, but also in landmarking and programmed landmarking of culture, super important. So on strategic locations on the waterfront, we planned these nice, beautiful, big buildings with, for example, film museum, theater, courthouse, musea, etc. So they have a fixed place on this waterfront, so you can travel by boat or experience the waterfront, also from the point of culture. And this means an enormous revenue for the city. So it's not only, it's always multi-dimensional. Originally, that's interesting, by the way, that the city itself planned to have a sort of urban business district on the waterfront. But then the first bank, the client ABN AMRO, they decided to go more near the airport, and out of that plan, the central business district was founded, and so the whole waterfront is more or less without big business. It's more, it's more culture, housing, and public space, so which really defines the character of that waterfront. I told you also that public space is very important, so how to invest in it, that it can be adaptive to climate, but also to different kinds of uses. So I think in any waterfront project, the huge investments will be in public space. When we go to the northern waterfront, this is also the thing we exhibited in Seoul. We look at a totally different kind of character of a cityscape. So here on the southern part were harbors, so not really polluted, but just all the remnants of harbors, which were empty, redone in new city. But on the northern waterfront, there were really large industrial sites, very polluted areas, very hard to make new city schemes here. But anyway, we're working on it, and we're doing it quite successfully, I think. Here you see, I will show you some projects. This is the NDSM, it's a former shipyard. It used to be a secluded island, and with the water going around it. And this is there's a remnants of the old ship yard. Really big ships were built here. Then when it was empty for a few years, it was squatted, and then the city made new plans to build first for the whole area, to build a sort of new urban area in it. But the local forests were so strong, and I'm really lucky that we also preserve now this whole eastern area, which contains old industrial heritage, let's say, which has a very big cultural impact on the city, and it's very important for the city. So the value of what's there, what's existing, what's in the history, should be preserved in a new planning. You see an example of an old crane dock, where by a local initiative of Tjeerd, is an architect in Amsterdam. She said, "Oh, you can't demolish it," because the city plan was to demolish this whole structure. And she made this plan to save it and to build an office building on top of it. So now you see that this kind of initiative is embraced also by the city, and it means that you add value and you really plan more towards your history, not only to the history and to the future. Here you see another example of how to reuse this kind of post-industrial sites. These were the slopes where the big ships were built and sent into the water. And here now we use it for big festivals, etc. And within these huge cascades of the old industrial, we just plan, on variety of programs. So how dance festivals, there's artists, villages within. So the numerous programming, this whole cascade city gives a huge liberty for cultural programming for the city itself. Next year, or no, I think in this end year, we'll open up the biggest street art museum in the world, also here and it started like really local, small, but now, more famous artists came in, already visible here in the area. And now this is going to be, professionalized, and it's also becoming a really, I think, important museum in Amsterdam and maybe worldwide, celebrating street art. Then we come to the Buiksloterham area. That's the area where also Tjeerd will explain more about. But what I want to tell you is how we work on this project. This is a photo we made, I think, last year when the master plan was finished. And I would like to explain the working method, which fits, I think, the Biennale theme, and also the way we could work more inclusively in urban planning. So the Amsterdam urban planning system was quite top-down for maybe decades, and now we are sort of trying to develop methods where we can include external professionals, young architects, habitants, stakeholders, etc., within the process of planning. And which is not easy, but you just have to do it and see what comes out. And this project, for me, was the first really test case of how you could do that. So normally you make a top-down plan as an urban planner, but here I invited 4 architects' offices, young talented architects, which Space and Weather is one of the offices also invited with Tjeerd. Our own design team was included, and also a landscape architect. So we had a sort of really integral design team of inner people and outer people together. Every week we came together, building a big model, changing ideas, and slowly we came to a final plan, let's say. Not only that, we also incorporated the participatory on the green vision. So with local residents who were quite sharp, because they knew that their surroundings would be intensified. Now there were about 1,000 houses. And when the plan is finished, there will be 8,000 houses. So their whole surrounding is changing, and they really wanted to be sure that we incorporate enough green and quality in the urban plan. So we invited also them to show what we're doing. And I think this is really special. This is our vice mayor, Marieke van Doorning, who also addressed these habits, these people, by showing that we really try to work together with them to make a plan. This is the same. Last week we had a lecture from Paris, and I think also the mayor there, Haccou, is really has a strong feeling for urban planning, and I think that also the political aspect in that case, or the willingness to really open up and show that urban planning is important, also from a political standpoint, is quite important, I think, for our job. So here's some pictures we made. What we did, we really searched for the history of the area, the industrial history. For example, here we found old pictures of a building demolished in the 60s. It was built in the 1920s and was an old waste plant directly on the waterfront. And what they did then is that they collected waste from the inner city, they shipped them over water, and they were treated here in this plant. And I think this is a brilliant way of dealing with waste, because you use the water in a much smarter way. Because nowadays we have heavy lorries, they're destroying the old quays and bridges of the city, which is a really big problem right now. But so sometimes by studying the past, you can also learn how to be more sustainable in the future. So this is like, for me, this is a picture about sustainability in a new way. And we also found remnants of old social experiments where people who were poor and they had to live in a sort of confined area to learn how to live, because later the city gave them a dwelling. And later in the Second World War, this was partly used as a ghetto for Jewish people before they were sent off to terrible destinations. So also reinterpreting these kind of very special elements within our plan was part of the DNA, let's say, of this planning system. Well, we also say that urban planning right now is not only building programming, but maybe also the most important thing, the most important program is public space itself. So creating places where people can interact, sport, etc., etc. So thinking about the in-between, let's say, and what the in-between means and how people can meet is super important for me. When we reflect on the theme, I think for the next Biennale, which is building the resilient city, I was also thinking, okay, what are we doing right now in Amsterdam, and how could we maybe contribute next year and have a discussion afterwards here. So some themes I will show you. So Amsterdam has a very bicycle culture, bike culture. And what's interesting is that it's growing quite fast. So now this is in 2014, it was in a model split 32%. It's now already in the 40%. So let's say the bicycle and the pedestrian, they are used most. But what you see in reality is that there's a kind of unfair system of using space. So for example, the bike is used mostly by our inhabitants, but the use of the space is totally different. So here, car parking space. Yeah, you need a lot of space for car parks, which 97% of the time don't move at all. And you sort of half of space you use for the car park. So we can plan much smarter in public space to give more meaning to this interaction and to mobility systems. So I think we are in that period of transgressing there. This is a picture of the Stationseiland, nearby the central station, where until now many bikes are parked. So there are more bikes than inhabitants in Amsterdam, about 1.2 million bikes around. And you see them everywhere, that they're parked and they also consume space. So when we redesign, for example, this square, we get rid of car infrastructure, we open up for water, and underneath the water, we build parking spaces for bicycles. So to keep the plateau itself free for pedestrians. So these are some renderings of these images that when you see that there's more space for pedestrians, for bicycles, on top, less for cars. And underneath this whole water system are 12,000 bicycle parking places. So, I mean, it's a big urban public investment to work for the city of the future, let's say. This is on the front side of the central station. And also on the backside, on the waterfront, which is a really beautiful area with big views, we do the same. So we make a new plateau and underneath bicycle storage. So right now when you go to Amsterdam, you see this big bicycle storage on top, so that it's blocking the view. But in this is under construction right now. So in 2 years' time, you'll have an open view on the water. So the whole quality of public space and spatial quality is, I think, #1 for pedestrians. Not only here, we do it on many places, many big squares. This is a Zuidas. This is a central business district. It was a totally stone square with no trees, nothing. We redesigned it into a more green area with many seating places. Very important that you give people the opportunity to sit. But not only that, underneath, also here, underneath the whole square is a bicycle parking. And underneath the bicycle parking is a 1 meter storage tank for water. So in cases of heavy flu or rainfalls, so also this whole system is containing the water. So it's integrated thinking, design thinking, which is social, cultural, biodiverse, but also water management in one element. So that's the way we try to plan our cities. Colleagues of mine are now working on a quite successful program. It's a new Amsterdam integral design method. And I think it could be interesting to maybe show it next year in the Biennale. And it's a really refined method of how to deal with public space in this kind of way. So that we're doing research on multiple themes, which is about water management, materials, mobility, soil, underground, energy, flora, fauna, so nature inclusive. And we find all kinds of ways of possible combinations and measurements in design to incorporate all these elements. So I will just show shortly, but this, for example, one of these parts, which is water management. So we really study and the public space and the buildings together, how they work, how they're measured, how the water is working, and how we integrate them into the new standard way of designing a street network. So this, I think this is just one picture of hundreds, but we're really working on this integrated way of public space design. I think this is my last slide before Tjeerd starts. When I think of an inclusive city, I think it could be really biodiverse, productive, very important, inviting, which also Seoul is, I think, by heart, and adaptive. I mean, you should plan in a more adaptive way. And I think not focus on fear and control, but focus on well-being of nature and of people. I think this is my last slide. So this is a picture I found on the internet. The people of Seoul thanked the workers who fight COVID by new technology, but I think this is a great picture to end my story. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We have a lot to learn from each other. This is going to be exciting. I want to introduce our second speaker, Tjeerd Haccou. He's founding partner of Space and Matter, an agency of spatial thinkers, makers, and initiators. In its 10-year existence, the office has fostered numerous bottom-up initiatives, such as the Bridge House Hotel Suites, the Clean Tech Playground, the Quavel, and the floating neighborhood Schoonship. The office focuses on improving the built environment and promoting a cohesive society. Tjeerd carried out his architectural training both at TU Delft and SciArc in Los Angeles. Please welcome Tjeerd.
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for joining and the invitation. Before I start, as you see my office in the background, I'm actually not at my office. I'm on holidays, so I don't have full control over my Wi-Fi connection. I hope it keeps up, so bear with me, please.
This is very meta. It's double virtual. We're seeing you virtually,
exactly.
and then we're seeing you virtually in your office. Yes.
Yeah. Oh well, we see how it goes. Okay. Well, Space and Matter is an office that me and two other partners founded 10 years ago. our office has kind of a dual ambitions. So on one hand, we have space, which is focusing on spatial design, architecture, and planning. And on the other hand, we have matter, which is more about research, ideation, and concept development, more the soft side of what space can do. Well, when we started, we always thought, do we want to be, we started as architects, but do we want to be architects who just make nice buildings, or do we want to contribute more to society? So since the beginning, we have thought that spatial design can really have a big impact on how people live, how they work, how they can be happy and healthy, and also on the way that people use their planet. So that has always been our ambition, to really design for that idea, and we do that in a very integrated approach, where we look at both social cohesion, at resilience, at mobility, at all these things, and try to put them together in one spatial condition. We do that on multiple levels. So this is kind of the larger level, the participatory urban designs, mainly in the Netherlands. We make plans preferably together with residents or people that already live around the areas. We mainly in Amsterdam, we are working now on 3 different urban plans, and some other in the south of the Netherlands. But what also characterizes our office is our kind of bottom-up ways of working. So when we started in 2010 or 2010, there were no commissions because we had a financial crisis going on, and we had to come up with our own ideas, our own concepts, and start building projects out of those. So there were no questions. Nobody called us for a commission, and that led to kind of particular projects like this the Suites Hotel that John already introduced, which is a hotel that we made out of 28 bridge houses in Amsterdam that were becoming redundant. We also initiated a large rooftop urban farm in The Hague, another city in Amsterdam, where there's 1,200 square meters of grow beds for crops and 500 square meters of fish beds below them. And the dirty water of the fish is pumped towards the green beds to feed the plants. So it's kind of a circular loop there. Another thing we do frequently is helping kind of building groups, bottom-up building groups, to realize collective residential buildings. And we've done, I think, around six of those. And we really promote this kind of way that people themselves come up with ideas and create their dreams, instead of having a commercial development, just building something that would kind of fit everyone, and then you get kind of boring buildings. But today I will talk a little bit about the Buikstad area that Paco already introduced quite a bit. It is in the north of Amsterdam, and our office is actually right in the middle. This is also the place where our kind of first projects really started, and 2 of those I would like to tell a bit about. That is 1, the Keuvel, and 2, Schoon Schip. It's real Dutch with sound, but it means clean ship. Another thing that might be relevant for this presentation is the self-built houses and at the arrow is actually where my own house is. So I both live and work in the area that I also have the most relevant projects that we do. I made a 5-minute city for myself. So this Buikstad area, as Paco already mentioned, used to look like this, a very industrial zone, a lot of heavy industries there, with the Fokker airplane factory, with waste treatment plants. So that led to a highly contaminated soil all over the area. Municipality had big plans for this zone, or still has, but they already had it before the financial crisis. They made a huge master plan for also like 8,000 houses, and we're really kind of speeding up in the lead to 2010 to implement this master plan. But then the financial crisis hit us, and all the developments in Amsterdam came to a stop because a lot of the commercial parties did not want to invest anymore. Plus, the municipality also has to pay a lot of money to get things going, and that was not possible in those times. So then Amsterdam came up with the idea: what if we let our citizens come up with plans? And then Bergsloterham became a test area for self-built housing, both on very small scale, so just individual housing, as in collective buildings. Well, the start of this was very slow. Well, personally, I also managed to buy one of those plots, but no one else wanted it. This was, I think, 2013, when it was kind of an unpopular way of building your house and of living. But then when it kind of started and people saw the potential, it became quite a popular thing in the years after that. So until it kind of climaxed in, I think, 2015, when people were camping out to wait in line for 6 weeks. And this kind of self-built camping site became news in itself, because it's kind of a micro society that invents their own rules of how people should behave in standing in line for their plot. It was kind of an interesting process. Well, so we had these self-built small-scale initiatives, but also the more collective buildings. And this is I think like seven different buildings. It's also in the movie that is playing behind you, that were initiated by collectives, building collectives. And this is actually how large parts of the Bergsloterham are now developed. So it's bottom up. It's people that form a community, have their own idea about housing, and they build with an architect the house that they want, without a commercial developer guiding them. Well, sorry for the bad quality of this image. This is a picture of the Keuvel in its state before 2000. It used to be and so this is the project that I would like to share with you. This is an old shipyard. Here you still see it in practice as a shipyard. But when we found this area in 2012, it was not a shipyard anymore. And it was actually the municipality that had this land, and they thought, well, we need to do something with this. This whole Bergsloterham area back then was a very kind of no-go area. It had all kind of like very small industrial little companies working there. And as a citizen of Amsterdam, you wouldn't want to go to the Bergsloterham. Then the municipality said, well, let's launch a tender for this empty vacant space, and ask commercial or like market parties if they would like to build a creative incubator on top of this land. But there were a couple of issues. So as in the whole Bergsloterham, the land here on the Keuvel side was very polluted. So it had a lot of contaminated soil. Another issue was there were no buildings. So making an incubator space for people to work, where are you going to position them? And then an incubator space is meant for people in the creative industry to find very affordable office space. So there is very little budget. But if you came up with a plan that would be realistic and manageable, then you would earn a 10-year lease of the municipality of Amsterdam. So no money, but soil. Then we started to think, how can we deal with these issues? And we formed a group of I think a couple of architecture offices and a landscaper. And the landscape architect, he came up with the idea to use phytoremediation to clean the soil. So that means you plant plants, and the plants they kind of suck up the contaminants, and they just use them to grow. And if we make the whole area a kind of green garden that cleans the ground, then we could leave it in a better state while we leave after 10 years. So Then another idea that we had is why not put old houseboats from Amsterdam on this found garden then, because houseboats in Amsterdam have a negative value when people want to renew them. So people in Amsterdam, they have a position for their boat, they want a new one, they have to get rid of the old one and they have to get it demolished. So we thought, well, if they don't want to demolish it because they have to pay like 10,000 euros for demolishing the boat, then we take the boat for free maybe and we put them on land. So then we have free space. Then when we position all the houseboats on the land, we make a boardwalk to connect them and to keep people off the contaminated soil. And we just use the land as a creative incubator. And then after 10 years, when we need to leave, so that will be now in, I think, 5 years from now, we just put the boats back in the water and sail to another location while leaving the Keuvel as a greener and cleaner place than we found it. So that was our plan, and we made a visualization with that. And then in 2012, we heard that we actually won the competition. We were very happy, and we did not do it alone with designers, but also with a lot of entrepreneurs who already came up with an idea how they would like to work on this land and what they wanted to do with their houseboat. So this was the first boat that we got. We paid €1 for it. It was in terrible state, but with a lot of help from the people who eventually rented this boat, we could manage to kind of revamp it, make a new facade around it, also make it way more sustainable and insulate it in a proper way. And then in November 2013, we collected all the 16 boats that we managed to buy, and we put them on the land with a huge crane. We got a lot of kind of weird objects, and I think the average price here was really €1 per boat. The ambitions of the Keuvel, especially the sustainability ambitions, were really high, but there was very little money. So our partner office, Metabolic, who is a kind of sustainability advisory office, they organized workshops for all the future tenants to make, in a very low-tech way, sustainability systems. So in the right bottom, you see a self-made heat exchanger for the boats. On the left bottom side, you see a water filtration system for the sink water, tap water. And in this way, we managed to create a lot of kind of very low-tech innovations, but that led this Keuvel development to be close to an off-grid development. And the nice thing about it is that it is always in development. So more and more innovations come to light every year. So they're really building it to become a very sustainable place. So there's solar panels on all the roofs of the boats. There is an aquaponic farm with fish and this greenhouse on top, and it has the same circular system as the greenhouse that we made. There's floating gardens. There is a boat that produces biogas from the waste of the houseboats, on which you can then eventually cook pizzas in the restaurant. But one of the main innovations is the smart grid. So all the boats, they are connected together with a blockchain-based smart grid. So the restaurant that you see on the left top, it needs a lot of power, and all the houseboats on the right side, they have the solar panels. So the houseboats, they can sell their photovoltaic power to the restaurant, and in exchange, they get Juliets, which is a kind of cryptocurrency. And with that cryptocurrency, they then can go to the restaurant and just buy food or beer. So it is a very concrete way of how a system like this could work. Because of all these clean tech innovations, there was a really community around these ideas that came to the Keuvel, both to work but also to enjoy themselves. So it is a very strong creative clean tech community that was built by building the Keuvel. Here you see some screenshots of that it can be really tranquil and quiet on the left in between the different boats that people work in. But there's a lot of events also that attract people to the site. And the nice thing of attracting this many people, so on the opening day, we already had like 3,000 people there. And it kind of confronts a lot of people with the issues of climate change and how we can deal with them in a circular way. So also the routing on the boardwalk, there's all these signs on how we treat the different topics. So it is really a kind of educational routing to this site. Well, the Keuvel got a lot of attention in the media globally. So we were published, well, also in Korea, in Japan, in China, in the US, all over the world, which was really nice because then also stories land at other sides of the world. But also for the local context, it did a lot because Amsterdam then saw this happening, and we call it the circular economy that we try to push at the Keuvel, and then all the developing parties, the builders, and all the groups and the municipality that were developing in the Buiksloterham area, they kind of signed a manifesto that all the developments in this area would have this circular ambition, so that we would take care about reusing waste, being very smart with energy. So that became the big spin-off from the Keuvel, that all the developments in the Buiksloterham area, which will be 8,000 houses in the coming 10 to 15 years, will have the same circular ambition. And this whole Buiksloterham will then become a kind of ecosystem network. Well, one of the most advanced projects in this area is then Schoonschip, Cleanship, in which we already made a lot of the ideas developed at the Keuvel, like scale them up and put them into practice for a residential project. And Schoonschip was also a real bottom-up development. So it started with the lady on the left, Mariam, who we met, I think around 10 years ago. And she had this dream that she wanted to live with her friends in a very sustainable and floating way. And when we met, we said, well, we would love to help you with realizing your dream. And we had some workshops with the group into kind of translating their idea into a plan. So we made a booklet, we made nice visualizations and a nice model, and then we went to the municipality of Amsterdam and asked, can we have a place for this? We just need a plot of water. And we managed to get one in the Buiksloterham area, as you can understand now. And we had this idea to make it a very floating eco village. There are currently 46 households living here on 30 floating kind of villas almost. So we helped the group to create a urban plan for them. What they thought was very important, that they could all have their individual house. So we made a plan for different building envelopes that they could then fill in with their own architects. And this plan was also optimized using some AI to get the best views for everyone and the best production of solar power. So everyone could pick their own architect, and with the building envelope that we gave them, made their own housing design. The nice thing of building in water is that you can just do it elsewhere. So all the building sites were not actually in Amsterdam, but a bit outside Amsterdam. Some also were just built on land. And yeah, here you see 7 of those boats, and then they had to be put into the water. And for that, we needed a huge crane. So one of these boats, they weigh around 200 tons. So they're very heavy. And this is the largest floating crane in Europe that we needed to rent for a lot of money to put all the boats into the water. And then I think it was beginning 2019, the boats came floating in. So, and here you see kind of the potential of building on water, that you don't really have a local building site, but the building sites can be elsewhere. And then you can just, by floating them in, build a neighborhood overnight. So Schoonschip has a lot of collective features, sustainability features. They share 500 solar panels. Each boat has a battery pack in the boat. They have heat pumps that use the water they float in to balance the heat in the house. Well, they have vacuum toilets, a smart grid, a lot of these things. And all these individual boats are then connected to the smart jetty, as we call it. And in this jetty, there's all the infrastructure to make this neighborhood a smart neighborhood. This is one of the coolest things, I think, in the area, and that's the sewage system. So everyone has a vacuum toilet that is connected to a grid, and it's a local grid, and the grid goes to this biorefinery that you see floating in on the left side. And this biorefinery exchanges the toilet waste into energy and biogas and to fertilizer. And then the fertilizer is then sold to farmers in the area, and the biogas is used to heat up the boats again. So that is in a circular way. You don't have waste. You just profit of everything. And then there's the smart grid. It's a bit of an upgrade from the smart grid that was used at the Keuvel. People also have a dashboard at their house, so they can see how much power they produce and how much they consume of their neighbor. So they can really trade energy with their neighbors. Well, in the house itself, there's also a lot of smart technology. Also for instance, water. Being smart with water, they have a recirculation shower that kind of filters the shower water and then it circulates it on your head. So you only need 3 liters of water, and you can take a shower for 20 minutes without feeling sorry about it. The Schoonschip community also shares mobility, so they don't have their own cars, but they share a fleet of 12 electric vehicles. And also electrical bikes, electrical cargo bikes, and this is the first mobility hub in the Buiksloterham area. So that's how we see a smart floating community. And last time I presented this then the question was, how can you scale this up? It's a very good question, but now I found some pretty relevant projects that are actually already thinking about scaling up these kind of principles. So also the United Nations has sponsored a project by BIG to make to really think about how floating cities could be a solution for the climate change. And there's a lot of projects that deal with this matter. We think it's a really great way to think by making these bottom-up developments possible, and how you can make autonomous living possible in the future. So that is what our concern is. Well, now I showed you 2 of these bottom-up initiatives, and then I go back to the master plan that we made together with Paco and some other architectural offices, because there was a lot of new developments starting in the Buiksloterham, and the master plan was just not there anymore. So we needed to change this, and that's when when Paco invited us as one of 4 offices to think with him and the municipality about how we could make this new master plan. But not just us, also neighbors that already lived in the area had a say in this. And here they focused on how to deal with the green in the area. And one of the main topics in the master plan that we thought of was how can you kind of embrace this pioneer DNA of the Buiksloterham? How can we reserve spaces for things that you cannot plan top down, but need to come from citizens themselves? And I think that was kind of like fixed in the experimental zoning that we created. So there will be 60% of residential program in the area and 40% of different program. And of that program, 10% should be experimental. And I think that is a real key ingredient to make a neighborhood really attractive, that there's new stuff happening all the time. So what we and all the other offices did is kind of create an urban, not an urban plan or master plan, but an urban framework in which all kind of initiatives can land. So the future of this area will look a bit like this. It is more about the density than about the actual shape. And the experimental spots, which with my mouse I cannot show you, but there's a lot of, so 10% is experimental kind of playground in the area, and they are paid for by the benefits or the commercial residential housing. So and then you can also make it kind of financially feasible to have a low ground fee, low land fee for experimentation. And I think that's a crucial element of this plan. Also, the mobility hub that I showed you at Schoonschip looked pretty low tech. There is now plans to also use this model of mobility hubs all over the area, and then this is the idea of having kind of a like mobility parking above a plinth of activity, possibly also to be combined with schools in the area. And then this is the look of the canal that we see in the future. I also would like to show this map. So this is the map that the municipality made to make this idea feasible. So a map with kind of rules of the game of how high you can build and where you can build. But there's also a big booklet next to this with a kind of point system that all the developers are kind of seduced to take sustainability measures, and then they get benefits of being able to build more commercial housing, for instance. Paco already showed the bigger model. A great model was produced of showing what this could look like. And if you see the tower on the left, then we thought, so we also came up with a new bottom-up plan for that. But before I'm going to show that to you, this new master plan led to a lot of activity and to a lot of new initiatives in the area that were, for a large part, also like developed by neighbors or by new residents. But all these houses and projects have a very high grade of being self-sufficient and sustainable. So this is the tower that we envision. It's not actually Space and Matter that came up with the initiative. This is again a tower that was a dream of a group that calls themselves the Urban Tree Village, and they want to create like a village kind of community, but in a high-rise tower. And I think this is really a nice way to work on realizing dreams of groups of citizens and of communities and to build up our cities with that in mind. So that was my part of the presentation. Okay, thank you.
네, 그럼 토론을 시작하려고 하는데요.
We would like to begin the roundtable discussion. I would like to thank our two speakers for their great presentation. I'd like to invite Professor Kim Seung-hee to give his comments first. So we heard about Seoul and Amsterdam, and we are meeting together through the virtual platform. And you gave a presentation on We, the City, and we feel that Seoul is also a part of We, the City of Amsterdam. because we are thinking about the same challenges, and in the first presentation, I was impressed by the fact that the urban planning process was not top-down but bottom-up, and that everything was very horizontal and equal, and I think that it will inspire Seoul to do the same. And the challenges that Amsterdam faces is similar to what we face in Seoul, namely traffic issues. When I visited Amsterdam recently, I saw that the number of cars had been reduced, and I saw that there was a limit on the number of cars that could be circulating, and I saw that many more people were walking and using bicycles. I hope that Seoul will also be able to change its mobility system so that we can follow your example. And by reducing the number of cars in your city, you were able to get more parking space that was not used anymore and use it for other uses. And for urban planning, in the urban planning process, you will have changed the spaces that you allocated to cars, roads, or parking spaces. And for Korea also, during the past 10 years, in urban planning, we have tried to change the criteria for cars and parking spaces. We'd like to ask how your criteria has changed for parking spaces and cars. That's my question.
Yeah, we have got a mobility strategy which sort of reduces the use of cars in the city. And for example, we do that by setting standards for the amount of houses you add. Used to be, for example, like 1.5 car per house. And now it's like 0.7% per household. In some areas, even 0.3% per household. So you see that in policy, this stimulates or destimulates the use of owning or having a car or using a car, and then we stimulate these more new, sharing kind of concepts. So yeah, as an answer, it's a matter of policy, I think, and just doing it.
Yes, I was also very impressed by the fact that only 10% is cars account for only 10% of transportation, but it accounts for 50% of the space because it uses it for parking. So how is your policy for parking changing? For example, right now you've reduced the number of cars per household to 0.7, but nevertheless, if parking space takes up a lot of space, how are you going to deal with this mismatch?
파코 버닉 선생님. 네.
You cannot change the image and the use of a city overnight. So I think it starts with experiments. For example, there's an area in Amsterdam, it's called Dept, where local residents experiment with new kinds of public space design, where are less cars, more green. And they share a car park system. And when that proves successful and people can go there and experience this kind of feeling, how a new street could look, then you can scale it up. So you cannot just redo the whole city with a new policy. So I think you need some kind of physical experiments and explanations and connections to test them out. So you should use the city as a test bed. Like for example, also Barcelona does the same thing. There's a super block system. It's the Tjeerd grid where they combined 4 blocks and they cut away the middle streets. And they do the same thing. It's a test bed. So using the city as a test bed for this kind of innovations is, I think, the way forward. Yeah.
네, 이제 더 추가적인
Yes.
질문을 더 이제 드리면
If I can add
이제
another
그
question to
대학을
that.
졸업하고 이제 암스테르담을
After I graduated
있어가지고
college, I had a
옛날이죠.
chance to visit Amsterdam.
그때
It was a
이제
long
저의
time ago,
기억은
but I
한
remember
5층짜리,
that at that time
6층짜리를 넘지 않는
that the buildings
저층의
were
고밀의 주거들이
quite low for housing. It wasn't more than 5 or 6 stories high. But if you look at the master plans and new urban planning, you see that high-rise buildings are increasing and there's a lot of horizontal growth. So there's more density there compared to the past.
그것을 만들게 됐던 어떤 계기나 이유가 있을 것
How did
같아요.
that happen about? How did
그것에
this
대한
change
우려는 또
take
없었는지
place?
궁금합니다.
And when this change took place, was there any concern about it?
You mean about density or about high rise?
Both. 그러니까
Both, yeah.
예.
Both.
Yeah. And what you saw happening, and also in my story, is that the city became more attractive and it's growing quite fast. And we set a standard that we have to densify within the existing perimeters. And the question is so big that we have to build in higher densities to accommodate all these new houses. And on the level of density and high rise and how it compares to the existing city fabric, that's a really good question and also very in discussion and debate in the city. So, for example, we are also part of a UNESCO area, the inner city of Amsterdam. So we have also, when we make new plans, for example, I showed you one plan with high-rise elements, which is a bit out of the center. Still, we have to, from certain street points, we set out lines. We tested in the 3D computer models. What is the effect of high-rise on the inner city? So that's studied quite meticulously. So only on certain points you can have high-rise, because otherwise they affect the old cityscape too much. So we try to find a sort of balance between new high density, but also respecting the visual impact it has on the existing city. But choosing higher density is maybe a sort of standard. Otherwise we cannot cope with this kind of city growth. And it also means that the investment in public space in return should be equal. So the denser you build, the more you should give back in quality to the people of Amsterdam. So, for example, you see that over the last 15 years, there's been a super big investment in public space, in parks. Also, the way people use public space is much more like your own room in your house, like an urban room. So I think that's a denser city also changes the way you act and feel in public space. So that's a responsibility both for from the city, but also from the people who live in the city. It's like a common responsibility to take care of public space. So for me personally, that is more important or intriguing than speaking about density itself. It's more what is the effect on the way people travel through and live in the city, in public space. Thank you.
Thank you. 네, 항상 시민들이 적극적으로
So
참여해야 된다는
active
것을
engagement and participation of the citizens is essential.
그러면 이번에는
That was very
경기대학교
interesting.
상영 교수님께
Now I'd like to
말씀을
invite Professor Chon Young
드리겠습니다.
to give his comments.
네, 그러면 저는 두 번째
I'd
발표하신
like
분한테
to ask a question to our second speaker,
Tjeerd 하코 대표님.
to Tjeerd
되게
Haccou.
재밌게 들었습니다.
I really enjoyed listening to your presentation.
회사 이름부터
And
공간
the
디자인만
name of your company is very interesting. You not just work on space design, but you also work on matter, and it's a new type of urban design, I think. And I believe that it's somewhat a bottom-up urban design. We talk about this a lot, and I didn't know how to specifically, but your presentation was very interesting. You lease a plot lot of land and you renovate houseboats to create a new type of city, and it's possible. And that was really interesting because it was so new. And it's very small scale, but it shows us that we have the power to transform a city through methods like this. And you have a 10% experiment zone in that space. And I think it's very important to be liberated from the structured city. But is it zoned, or this 10% experimental space, do you allow this space to be used in a certain zone? And if somebody makes a recommendation or proposes something, is that possible? Or do you go through a committee who decides? I think it's through these methods that the city can evolve and grow, and it's very innovative. So could you explain a little bit more about this 10% experimental zone and space that you have?
Well, it is not yet all worked out on how we're actually going to make that a concrete working method, but there is already a lot of ideas on how to do that. So one is an online neighborhood platform on which neighbors or other people can propose ideas. And online there's a lot of smart tools that you can use to kind of workshop with groups. So also the upvote, downvote, the like and not like buttons are very helpful. So if a neighbor would propose an idea, for instance, to I don't know, create a big honeybee farm, for instance, as an example, then other people could say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it. And you could then see, well, what ideas are very popular. So that could be a way of working for that. Another thing that I think is very important, and especially for experimental zones, is that citizens have the power of saying things about it, or having almost having ownership on them. So it's very important not to have commercial parties try to get financial benefit out of these experimental spaces, but to have initiatives that can just run themselves without a big profit. So the idea is that if you, as let's say 10,000 citizens, would all pay a little bit of money, as in 1,000 euros, to own an experimental zone, then we, as these 1,000 citizens, can also decide what is going to happen in this zone. And we, because we live in this neighborhood, do not just have a benefit by profit on our money, but we have profit by nice functions and nice activities in our neighborhood. And we don't need a lot of money in return. We just want those activities to happen. So I think that is a better balance. And we are all having quality as the end ambition and not financial profit as the end ambition. So that is another ownership model that could be very useful for these experimental zones. I hope that explains a bit.
그러면 혹시나 그냥 아이디어상 여쭤보는데 혹시
I'd like to
아까
ask
블록체인
you out
얘기도
of
나오고
curiosity,
그러던데
since you've also
그런
mentioned
것들이 가능성이
blockchain,
있을까요? 만약
do you think
도시의
those
어떤 퍼블릭
things
그런 익스페리먼트를 할 때 아이디어를 가지고
can also be feasible on the new experimental space? You said that you talked about the East Indian company and how they were funded. Can these idea products be produced, and can that be accompanied with a profit model as well? Have you thought about that? Of course, the public side is the most important, but have you also thought about the profit models?
Yeah, definitely. So if you have ownership as citizens, and you could totally do like book that in a blockchain model, then everyone can have a share in a company or an initiative, and the profit that is taken out of this initiative can then be also returned to you as one of the shareholders of the initiative. And you could all do this in a blockchain environment. So, but that's more like to track everything in a proper and transparent way. So yeah, definitely a possibility. I have to say, we don't make blockchain models. We have partners that are experienced with that. We can just think of we can think creatively about how things should work, but the actually programming and making, we don't do.
그리고 아까 저도 하코 선생 대표님
I also have a question for Haccou. Like Professor Chon said, you renovated houseboats as homes and they are floating on water and people are living in them. That's very interesting. And I thought that that would be great also for Korea. But when you have floating houses that are docked, what about the water services and electricity services? The city must provide these utility services, but what type of resources do you provide through the city? What kind of contract do you have? I would like to know.
Yeah, that was very special because usually in the Netherlands, each household needs to have its own net plug-in, right? So everyone has a contract with the net provider, the service provider. But in this case, we were allowed to see the community as one user. So we had 46 households, which are seen as one user for electricity, the providing of electricity, and also for water. So we have one contract with the electricity provider and one contract for water. And especially if you use these solar panel smart grids and really produce your own energy, it is very important to have only one connection with your community, because then you can do the exchange internally without a net provider being in the way. But we use very little energy, like electricity, because we generate a lot ourselves. For water, we do have a lot of filtration systems, but we do have a connection to the Amsterdam Waternet grid. Although with the biorefinery, we also create fresh water. So we hope to balance that out at a certain level, that the fresh water we take, we are also able to export fresh water again to the water net.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
다음은 중앙대학교
Now I'd like to ask Professor Yoon Seung-hyun from Chungang University to make his comment. Yes, thank you very much for the two very interesting presentations. After hearing the presentations, I thought it was extremely interesting, but I was thinking about how we could apply it ourselves. One of the main things I heard about was the horizontal relationship, which was the basis for the citizens to present their ideas and for the municipality to accept those ideas to create spaces in the city. I have two things that I'd like to know here. There could be a creative and interesting opportunity to renew the city. Sometimes that means that these new ideas can conflict with the existing systems or policies of the city. How is that worked out? There must be a way or some mechanism to work this out. Do you have that mechanism? Secondly, the citizens' ideas could be wrong sometimes. How do you make sure that it is aligned with the value of the city? And how do you make sure that these ideas are realized in a good way for the citizens? Does everything work well in your system right now? Or are there sometimes bad ideas from the citizens? How do you deal with that? For the second speaker, I'd like to ask a question. The experts can propose ideas for improvement of the urban space. Then how are those proposals accepted by the city government. What sort of system do you have in Amsterdam so that these expert opinions are well reflected in the policies of the city government?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, this is an intriguing question, and I think also a difficult one, and maybe the most important one, because the basic starting point of opening up as a system and inviting parties to experiment within your city, that's where the change starts, and the change becomes visible, I think. So it's not only a city relation, it's also inviting academia. For example, we have a new institute which is confines of the AMS, Amsterdam Metropolitan Solutions, which is the MIT Boston landscape in Wageningen, Netherlands, and the TU Delft as 3 universities who co-join forces to experiment within the city. What is important then that together with the citizens, you've got a sort of helix system where things can be tested out in the city. So I think, as an answer to your question, and that stage of horizontal connection where this experiment leads to a new policy is still not yet there. So that's a very good question, I think. So how can you make a sort of process architecture, which when something is proven, you reach a point and you say, okay, this will be implemented into some kind of policy. That openness in relation between policy making and experiment is not yet there, but what you see happening, and that's a visual thing, which things, for example, Tjeerd just explained and showed, is that we are doing it. We are trying and moving forward. And I think that that's also a part of these kind of cooperations and seminars and the way we can just show it and then discuss it. We can also need help from other cities who do the same kind of thinking in a different way. Maybe on a bigger scale or on a smarter way. I think, for example, Seoul has a much smarter way of implementing infrastructure in the city. We are quite talented, I think, in water management and public space. So it's also a way of opening up and discussing how you can help each other. So as an answer, I think there's not yet a clear division between experiment and how it lands in policy. But I think this whole discussion is a debate, and the debate is important. Tjeerd, is that something you can add something to?
Yeah, well, I would like to answer the second question. I hope I understood it correctly. So I think it is a little bit of how to get expert opinion into the process of the participatory urbanism, because obviously citizens are not experts on how to build cities, and we have gone through some processes where actually a top-down plan was refused by citizens. Citizens came up with their own a kind of master plan for a neighborhood, which was, well, according to the expert opinion, not a proper plan. It had a lot of issues in it. So then we were asked to guide the process from there, because there was kind of an issue, the municipality plan against the citizen plan. And what we notice is that if you educate people, also citizens, on what they need to think of and what consequences of some design decisions can be, then they start understanding how you can, as an expert, look at these issues. And then the key is just proper communication between all the parties and listening to each other and understanding each other's points of view. And it is really the process that can help people and a municipality to come together and in collaboration come up with a shared vision that is also a proper solution. So it is not that citizens can just come up with an idea and that's accepted by a municipality. It is citizens come up with an idea. I hope my internet is still on. Citizens come up with an idea and it is taken into a process together with experts, together with the municipality team to grow that idea into a proper plan or proposal.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I agree, and I think there's also like a mental issue that when you show as a city that you're opening up in that way, then also, yeah, some ideas are just not, you cannot really implement them. But when you can explain it together with experts or a filter, which you in the process architecture, I think people also believe it. Because then they're part of the decision making in a way, and then they believe, okay, this is quite complicated. I haven't thought of it this way. So bringing in people in that mental process is, I think, key.
What? Yes. I have we're beginning to wrap this up a little bit, but I have a question kind of a question, but kind of a comment for both of you, and maybe a bridge to the next Biennale, which the theme, as you know, is Crossroads. What's super fascinating, and we talked about it during the sound check, and maybe if you could explain a little bit more in detail about what happened, but if the Netherlands hadn't gone through their economic recession, this devastating, sort of economic decline in 2010, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm trying to think about the alternate reality. We wouldn't be talking to Paco, and we definitely wouldn't be talking to Tjeerd. We'd be talking to some rich developers. We'd be talking about parking everywhere. I don't know what we'd be talking about. The alternate reality is scary, to be frank. And it's a lesson to be learned that sometimes these pauses in history are actually very important. And maybe these pauses have not existed for the city of Seoul. Maybe Seoul needs to take this pandemic now and take a pause and rethink things. So this idea of I'm just imagining an exhibit, two alternate realities. The reality you presented today and the second reality of what would have happened if you had taken another path. So I'm really interested in this crossroads, actually. Could you talk about it a little bit? It just seems almost like the happy ending to an amazing movie, but I'm sure it's not that easy.
Yeah. Shall I start, Tjeerd?
Sure.
I think we're in a heavy crisis, in a worldwide crisis, and in any crisis, you will find innovation. So that's how you start it. And I think you're right. I mean, there are two parallel kind of possibilities, and we're on one side, and we're talking to you right now. But yeah, without the economic crisis, we wouldn't have this kind of innovation in the city. And when you look at the current health crisis and the way this also spread with fear, I think that's a totally wrong way of coping with a crisis. But when you can turn it around into creating opportunity for inclusive urban design, for biodiversity design, for this kind of new sustainable ways for urban design, and then co-work on it. I think that could be this could be an accelerator for this kind of new future. So I think we should find some courage by co-working to deal with the crisis and to create in a faster way what we're already working in for years. So I see it as a big opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, what I would say to that is that obviously we present to you a story today about all the things that happened in what we think is a good way. But I also have to say that the financial crisis is not there anymore in Amsterdam. It is booming again, and investors and money have a huge impact on the city as today. So we thought when we had the financial crisis that everything would change, but not everything changed. A lot of things kind of fall back into the way they used to be. And I think we have to be quite aware of it. And if we think that if that is not a positive way of working method, then we should create new strategies to kind of keep the percentage for experimental space in which you can do things in an alternative way, and that both the old way, the traditional way of investing a lot and gaining a lot, can be existing parallelly to this new way that we experienced during the crisis. So I think if they can benefit from each other, then it would be quite an okay situation. So the profit way, investing a little bit in the experimental way, gaining attention and getting traction that can be also turned into profit. So I think these two ways we should just be very aware and find ways how to make them two parallel realities.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I
good.
agree, and I also think that the
저도
political influence in that way can be important. That the politics supports this kind of thinking, and that, for example, scaling up from 1% to 10% of experimental space in cities, it's also a choice, and it costs you money, but it creates new value. So it's a different kind of approach.
Is the politics supporting? I mean, we have a wave of regressive, conservative, close the borders kind of things happening globally. What's it like over there?
We have
in the Netherlands?
Locally, we have a very progressive city board, city council, which stimulates this kind of thinking and acting, and that can change overnight with a when you have a new election, maybe a more regressive period will come. Then it's even more harder to fight this 10%. So I think we should also use this period to speed up.
Great.
I think personally it does create value in a deeper sense, and it's that's why we are also talking to you here. And we show what we show in Seoul.
Well, this is the beginning of a great conversation, and I'm so glad that you presented. Both of you presented today. You gave us a lot to think about, and what I had said last week is that these are topics that are to be discussed further. Today is just to whet our appetite, but we'll go more in depth next time, and hopefully for the next Biennale as well. And I just want to remind the audience that are online that we do have a series of Wednesday seminars, including one next week as well. And we're going to go from Amsterdam to Geneva next week. So we're actually traveling around Europe. And Michael Jacob, he's a professor at the Geneva School of Engineering, Architecture, and Landscape. He's going to actually talk about Switzerland as a laboratory for contemporary urban design and landscape architecture. So it's looking at landscape urbanism. So please join us, and I hope your friends in the Netherlands can join us. Maybe you two both can come back again. But this is a great discussion, and really enjoyed your presentation. I don't know if you hear responses from the audience, but there's gasps and there's people clapping, and there's a lot of excitement around what you presented. That's one thing that's unfortunate. You probably can't hear these kinds of reactions. But we really enjoyed your presentations, and they'll have a big impact here and beyond.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
And yeah, I also think that the Seoul is so innovative and so professional in how to treat urbanism and architecture. It's heartwarming for us, I think. So keep up that work.
Well, great. Well, we have two leaders in this room right now. Professor Seung-Hoi Kim, he's the city architect here, so I'm sure you have a lot to talk about in the future.
Yeah. Can he maybe give a short reflection on what he heard and what it could mean for Seoul? I'm just curious.
You know what? This is great actually, because I haven't formally invited you yet, but we have a another event that's also sponsored by the Netherlands Embassy on the 5th. And so Professor Seung-Hoi Kim is saying next time. So he wants to lead you to join us again on the 5th, if you can, online, to have the kind of closeout discussion.
Okay.
How's that?
Great. Yeah, I think it's
Great. Well, thank you. Well, we're going to have some closing comments from Professor Chun Choi, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
네, 오늘 그 휴가 중에도
Yes,
발표해 주신
I'd
하코
like to
대표님하고
thank
지난주에는
Mr. Bunnik and Mr. Haccou for attending this seminar.
오늘 세미나는 이것으로
With that, we will conclude today's seminar. Thank you very much. We'll see you again next week.